Thank you for joining us, everyone, for another episode of Live by Heart
Today
with your hosts, Don Spiegelberg and Wendy R. Wolf.
Hello, and welcome to the Live by Heart Today show number 10. This is a show designed to help you navigate change, uncertainty, and the new world we've found ourselves living in. We'll talk a little bit about science, a little bit about how our body works, a little bit about intuition, and a lot about transformation. Our theme for today is being neutral. And with me for our heart to heart is my co host, Wendy R. Wolf, a professional transformation facilitator.
Hey,
Thanks
Dawn.
for joining me, Wendy.
So glad to be here. Thanks.
You're welcome. I'd like to start today's show with a quote you shared with me from Solzhenitsyn.
Thank
The
you.
dividing line between good and evil goes through every heart. Did I get that right?
Yes.
And given the world events, we're seeing a lot of one side of this line right now. In our last show, we talked about how our experiences are colored by our past, and it creates our perspective. It sheds a light or a different color glass on the perspectives that we have. I'm seeing the difficulties that people are having with coming to terms with the events of late. It's like they're a blanket covering problems that we have, that we know we have. And now we're seeing bigger problems. Bigger problems are arising, erupting, because everything is just so raw and it's so real. So we're asking ourselves, what can we do right now? I don't live in Minnesota. What can I do in this moment to help, to facilitate, to shift, to change? In our last show, we talked a little bit about some tips for being neutral. We talked about getting in a higher perspective, changing that point of view, like being up on the bank rather than in the rushing water.
Yeah.
We talked about seeing the truth that there is rushing water. And today we're going to talk more about how to be and maintain neutrality. Thanks for joining me, Wendy.
Thank you, Dawn. And it's really was pretty prescient of you to, in the introduction, be saying every time now, this is the 10th show of navigating the new world we find ourselves in, because we're always finding ourselves in a new world. It's always a new river, right? But like lately, oh my goodness, what a new world. Really, things are changing.
Big changes, yeah.
Yeah, and getting uncovered. And thanks for starting with that quote. I didn't know you would. And hearing it from you, it's painful. I was noticing how painful it is. It's just so much easier to think, to project and say, you guys are the bad ones and we are the good ones. And that's it. So you go away and everything will be fine, or whatever.
Yes, this reminds me, I grew up in a religious household, and we went to church several times a week. And I was raised with reading the Bible and all the stories, right, about God's chosen people. So of course, as a child, I believed myself to be one of God's chosen, and the Gentiles were the different people. And there was a moment in time when I realized, wait a minute, I'm not a Jew. And that was hard to take. That was hard to realize that I was the other.
Wow.
Yeah. So
that's incredible.
The not realizing that I wasn't, God's chosen people was one of those lessons you learn as a child. our producer was in our show last week, and it was fabulous that he was explaining his life growing up and how he was different from everyone else. And it takes a while to realize when you're different sometimes, right? It takes a little while. And with what's happening now, more and more of us are realizing just how different we are. And we want to know what to do about it. What do we do about it? How am I supposed to be right now in the world?
Yeah. Yeah. And I just want to peek behind the curtain just a minute and say, us having these conversations the last couple of weeks was something that we had to talk about. Like, do we really want to do this? And how do we want to do this? And how can we be neutral and amused in the face of all the things that are going on? And I feel like I think we both feel like it's very important to just continue to be us and talk about how it is to be. Would you agree with that?
I agree with that. Talking about how we need to be is very important, especially because as I look at my friends and how they're being, as I look at social media feeds, right? I see my neighbors, they're angry, right? They want to put a stop to it. And so what are people doing? They're posting how they feel, right? They're posting how tragic it is, and they're reliving the experience every moment. They're reliving this anger, they're reliving the tragedy of it. They're reliving the injustice. And how do we move forward when we relive that situation over and over and over? It's like my mother after my father died. So it'll be 7 years in September. She was reliving the final days of his life over and over and over. And a part of it is necessary for us to heal.
Yeah. And then part of it, we're just creating grooves in our soul, in our mind, creating grooves of traumatic experience.
Right.
Yeah.
So we talked about this a little bit in prior shows, where when there is a threat, an imminent threat to our physical body, there is a stress response that we have that is normal and natural. And then we're supposed to run away or fight, right? Or freeze. We're supposed to handle the stress and then not be in stress and get out of that stage.
Mm-hmm.
And what's happening? Our thoughts are putting us back into stress. Yeah. Our feeds are putting us back into stress. The news is putting us back into stress. Mm-hmm. How am I supposed to be right now?
Yeah. Yeah. And I just want to say, for me, I feel like one of the important things we said last time, which I feel like I want to say again, is that if we can find a solid place to stand, if we can be neutral, then we can act in our best interest and the best interest of humanity. And if we can't, we're awash. We're just carried away by ourselves or what's going on in the world. And so, for me, there's lots of tools we've talked about. We have inner tools that can help us make change, which we can't go into. But I wanted to talk again about the scenario that started this with Mr. George Floyd, and how the perspectives of each of the peoples that were involved are something that a lot of us can relate to. And can we de-energize how we relate in that place? So I said last time that the place for me that was very stimulating in the moment this time was for the bystander, and being like, what do? I stand by and let this terrible thing happen, or I try to change it and I cannot, and I cause real trouble with the police. Because some people were pushing back and they weren't able to do anything. So how do I live with myself in that scenario? And I have a lot of experiences in my life that remind me of that. What do I do? How do I do it? Why can't I do it? How come I can't make a difference? I want there to be justice. Why can't I make it happen? Like, there's just what we call matching pictures for that. And how do I say hello to my own pain, my own stuck, my own trauma, my own stories that have their own little pathways in my head that really are triggering me, inciting me to be upset about this particular situation that isn't me. And how do I allow myself to let my issues come home to me and heal here? And that's part of what we do. You and I both, what we do.
I'm so glad you're mentioning that, because when people see what's happening and have a response, because the response matches an experience that we've had in our past, it brings up the same pain, the same hurt, as if it were happening to us right now.
Yes.
As if we're reliving it.
Yes.
And that's painful. It's painful for everyone.
Yes.
Should people continue to relive those experiences? I'd like you to talk about that in particular, because you mentioned it's bringing up memories and experiences in yourself.
Yeah, that are mine.
And we're not young. So that means those experiences and those things have been in us for a very, very long time. So how do we change things? How do we change the things that live in us and have been living in us that we haven't changed yet?
I believe that there's a lot of possibility for change. I've seen tremendous change, and I myself, and I've worked with a lot of people like with PTSD and serious abuse and trauma. The ability to de-energize, to take a lot of the power out of these things is very possible, but it doesn't happen like this. You can't just take a pill.
Right.
And that's like a deep process, but I feel like we can talk about some aspects that we employ in the process, but in general terms, to make it more real. And one of them that we keep talking about is neutrality, the practice of neutrality, and the gift of neutrality, and the choice of neutrality. For me, another one is, and it directly applies to what this particular conversation is about, like, who am I supposed to be here?
Right.
And it's permission. And the thing is that we have permission, we have freedom. We're supposed to be the land of the free. We have permission, we have freedom to be ourselves, to be with what is, to be with the possibility of change. But not a lot of us don't know it. We're just like, who am I supposed to be? What about the lady across the street? She's going to judge me. Or what about the person at church? Or what about, right? Like, there's just all this, like, how do I please all the people? And right now, can't please all the people. That's my opinion. And that's part of why it's uncomfortable to be having these conversations, because there's a lot of not being able to please the people going on.
Yes. And you have to be very careful with what you say and what you do, because it could all be turned on you, right? It could be turned against you. A gentleman recently lost his job because he was conducting an experiment about the events that happened around the death of Mr. Floyd. And it was perceived as insensitive and incorrect. And he was just trying to shed some light and some truth on the situation to give a different perspective. And that perspective was shut down.
Yeah.
So we have to be careful in our own process.
Yeah. And that's the question. Like, there are consequences. It's not like there's always consequences to our choices. Always.
Right.
And am I the captain of my ship or not? Am I willing to play my own game or not? And that's a choice. A lot of people are like, which way's the wind blowing? I need to go with that. And that's
Right.
fine. That's a fine choice, especially if we're conscious about it and saying, ooh, this wind is strong. I'm going to go this way.
Yes.
But also consciously, not just carried away, but consciously, I could be like, I'm going to be the one going into the burning building, not the one flying out on purpose. And there are consequences, but what do I'm going to do? And honestly, the whole thing about permission is that we have permission. We are adults. We have permission, and we can get help within us and practice in our lives to actually act according to our own lights and not according to like what the society is saying. And it's particularly noticeable right now, but it's always there. There's always the lady next door, and there's always the church and the school and what our parents thought, and it's always there.
Yes. Social norms are always there. Learning how to behave within the city we live in, right? The country we live in, and it's different everywhere. And Jordan Peterson talks about this in particular. He talks about safety and personal physical safety, and he says we recognize when we're safe and we're not safe. And interestingly enough, when we're sitting in a lecture hall, there is a particular way of being. There is a particular way of behaving, and everyone in that lecture hall agrees to behave in that way.
Mm-hmm.
And then if someone enters and they're not behaving in a particular way, then often it's difficult to understand, why is that person misbehaving, right? We say misbehaving, but why are they behaving differently?
Yes.
And what's going on? And it takes time to recognize what people are doing, and whether or not we're able to make a choice for ourselves that goes different and against what everyone else is doing. I think that's very difficult. And your points about neutrality, for those who are just joining us, we're talking about being neutral. And we've mentioned having getting a different perspective, getting up and getting a higher point of view, seeing the whole picture. And Wendy mentioned choice. Choosing how you want to respond is so powerful and so important.
Yes. And so,
You have a few others. Yeah.
Yeah. Something related to that is about following social norms is judgment, which is a form of what I call competition. Like, I want to be better, or sometimes worse, or I want to know better, or something like I want to be able to be the arbiter. And I am in my own space, in my own life. But the drive is to be the arbiter for everybody. And that's where I go out of my lane. It's like, in my lane, okay, I'm the arbiter, but not in your lane. You have a different life, and you come from a different place, and you're going to a different place, and you have different experiences. So I can't tell you how to do it. I can like choose to associate with you or not.
Right.
I'm not in charge of you. Again, you have permission to be you, and I have permission to be me. So just noticing that my desire, even to make myself wrong or bad, or to make myself right or better. And that's just built on what I call the lies, what I call invalidation, the lies that there's something wrong with me. If I know I'm okay, and then I know you're okay, and I can get out of the, I want to say, get out of the God business, get out of the judgment business.
I have to say, that's a hard thing because we're talking about, someone's life being terminated.
Yep.
And from one perspective, there's that joke that the guy shows up at the party, sees death, and then, drives across town. And then, right. And then he gets out and death shows up and he's like, whoa, well, I just saw you over at the party. What are you doing here? And he said, I came for you. And this is where I was supposed to get you. Right. So whose death is too soon? Whose death is not soon enough? And how do we stay in our own lane when we're seeing the difficulty of the line in everyone's heart? And we see the good and we see the malevolence that everyone is possible of.
Yes. Yes. And what I would say is that then from there we can choose, honoring that you have choices and I do, and we're living according to law, supposedly, in this society. That's right. Like we have the greater society that we build together, and we make choices about that. But for me to just want to micromanage your life says everything about me and nothing about you.
It's fanaticism, right? That's what fanatics do. And
together we can decide we don't want a world in which this happens, that Mr. Floyd is alive and then he's dead. We can choose to make choices about how we do it. But from my perspective, if we do it from neutral, we do it from being empowered, we do it from giving permission for people to have opinions and be who they are. From my perspective, that gives a lot of room to have conversations and make choices together.
That's beautiful. And having conversations and making choices together is exactly not what happened around the death of Mr. Floyd, right? There were not choices being given and collaboration. And so if we could come together and understand what we're capable of and understand that it's only by working together that the change will actually come. We're living in extremes, and we can empower each other to make differences, to not perpetuate the hate, or we won't. I would like to take a moment and to read some words written by our producer, and we'll talk a little bit about these words after. He says, life is a balancing act between all that we know and all that we don't. And we are finding out what we need to know now. Constantly processing the information that we are experiencing in the moment. Sometimes they are old experiences being relived in the present. Most of the time, they are completely new experiences outside our comfort zone where we are vulnerable. Information is energy, and we are a body of energy in an energy field on an energized planet. Everything runs off of energy. You can buy it in a bottle, you put it in your car, you light up your life with it. And the right mixture between human and information can make or break us.
And I understand he wrote that a while ago.
2015, I believe.
Because it seems like it's for now, doesn't it?
It sure does.
Yeah, information, communication, really seeing and hearing each other. There's one thing I did want to talk about. Is that okay?
Yes, please.
Is the power of actually seeing each other and actually hearing each other and actually hearing each other's stories. Like in our last session, we heard from Rusty, our producer, about some of his experiences, and I get him so much better now. I understand him more. I appreciate more where he's coming from than I did before. And so if we actually can give each other the honor of our attention.
Yes.
It's so healing. And we see it. Well, I mean, we see it in the power of AA, and in in some of the steps, but also in just the way they get together and listen, in confession. My most powerful thing to say is that in my healing process, I got together to trade with a friend of mine, a male friend of mine, for years and years and years, trade healings. And there were times that he would see, I mean, because I talked, but mostly because he could see some things that happened to me in my youth that were breaking. And it was so healing for me to be seen in general, but to be seen by a big, strong male person about the devastating things that happened with my father. It was very powerful for me to be seen and be just like, I get it. It was really life-changing for me.
You were recognized, and I hear that you were not judged. You were seen clearly in the present time. Mm-hmm. That's beautiful.
Yeah, clearly and validated. Like, I see you, I see what happened, and I honor you in it. And here we go. Yeah.
I think in some circles that's also referred to as witnessing each other, right? Seeing what is true, seeing what is there, seeing what is present from neutrality is very powerful.
It's very powerful. Witnessing, attention, observing. All these are very, very powerful words. And they're only possible from my perspective from at or near neutral.
Right. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
So, friends, if this message spoke to you, please tell us what's on your heart by leaving us a comment. Feel free to PM us. And for more information how you can live by heart, please go to our website at livebyhearttoday.com. Please like and follow this page and turn on your notifications. And from our heart to yours, creating a better tomorrow because you can live by heart today.
And that concludes this portion of
Live by Heart Today!
Thank you for watching. View more episodes on our YouTube channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's give a shout out to our sponsors. Thank you, We Are Historically, for making this show possible. Have a happy